Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the June meeting of the Audit Committee. It appears that we do have a quorum here this morning, that everyone is present, but one. And Mr. Cardillo, I did speak with him about 7 o'clock. And as far as I know, he's going to be here, but I guess I don't know that for a fact. That's great. Everyone else seems to be here and ready to go.
We're missing, aren't we missing Mr. Lippman? Jared Lippman?
Mr. Lippman is excused. He, when we reset.
And Ms. Mussog.
Oh, here's Jim.
Yeah, Jim was here. Jim was listening to Fred talk about him.
Nothing but good things. I said you'd be here. Ms. Mussog's status is a little bit up in the air, but I suppose technically she is a member, and for another day. And you're right, I do not see her. All right, has everybody had the opportunity to review the agenda for today? And while we're at it, the minutes from the May 19th meeting.
Yes.
Kirshner, yes.
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 Is there any discussion about either one of those?
No, I move that we accept the agenda.
Second.
All right, any discussion? Seeing none, I call the question, and all in favor of approving the agenda, please signify by saying aye.
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 Let the record reflect that the vote appears to be unanimous acceptance. And what about the minutes for the 29th?
19th.
So moved.
Second, the approval of the minutes.
All right, is there any discussion? Yes, Alderman Tierney.
I just want to say that I appreciate the thoroughness of the meeting minutes.
I second that.
Yeah, you're not the first one to tell me that. I agree. Well, seeing no further discussion, all those in favor of approval of the minutes from May 19th, please. Wait a minute, did we have a motion? I thought we did. Is there a motion to approve the minutes of May 19th?
Yeah, we had a motion and a second.
Okay. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All right. Next on the agenda, just a moment, I'm trying to move back and forth between a couple of different things here. The next item on the agenda is old business, and I would suggest that we go a little bit out of order at this point so we can take the report from CLA on the CAFRA, on their report on the fiscal year ending in 2019.
Agreed.
Is there a motion? I'll take that as a motion.
Let's jump to the CLA portion,
Let's go ahead and do it.
and then we can release them.
Sure.
From this pain.
Okay. Good morning. Good morning, Sean.
Morning. Keith?
And
Okay.
hey,
All right, are we ready? Good morning.
Good morning.
If we could get the slide deck up. My name is Keith Novak. I am a principal with CLA. Along with me this morning is Sean Walker, who is also a principal with CLA. And good morning, Mr. Chair, alderpersons, committee members, and management. What we'd like to do this morning is just go over the results of the 2019 audit. Next slide, please. The individuals who were primarily responsible for the audit were myself as the engagement principal. I was involved in the overall audit and deliverables. Sean Walker, who acted as the quality assurance principal or second reviewer, and Alex Lobeck, who was the engagement manager. We purposely set up Sean as the second reviewer this year. As I'm retiring at the end of this year, he will be taking my place as the engagement principal going forward. Next slide, please. What we'd like to do this morning is go over the scope of the audit, certain required communications, the results of the audit, give you a quick update on what GASB is doing and how it may affect the financial statements in the future. A quick financial statement summary. We have some slides with some graphs on them. And then, of course, any questions you may have. Next slide, please. Next slide. Okay, our audit scope was an audit of the city's June 30, 2019 financial statements, as well as the single audit, which includes the audit of the schedule of expenditures of federal awards and certification of the data collection form. This schedule of expenditures is the federal money that you received either directly from the federal government or indirectly through the state, and the audit of those funds. The data collection form is a federal filing that gets made with the U.S. clearinghouse, where all this information is reposited and available to the general public. And then we also performed a review of your annual Uniform Financial Report filing with the state of Maryland. Next slide, please. Next slide. Oh, there you go. Okay, our deliverables were our report on the financial statements, which in your case was a comprehensive annual financial report, or a CAFR, which is a higher level of financial statement than just a basic financial statement. A report on internal control over compliance with major program requirements, that is the single audit report on your federal programs. An internal control letter, also referred to as a yellow book letter, which is a report on internal control and compliance at the financial statement level. A governance letter, and then a management letter. And the management letter is a letter on internal control items and other operational items that we feel could benefit the city, but don't rise to the level of the internal control letter. Next slide, please. As far as required communications, our responsibility under generally accepted auditing standards is to obtain reasonable but not absolute assurance about whether the statements are free of material misstatement. And there are a couple of words there that are important: reasonable and material. It took the members of management and staff of the city a year to put the financial information into the system. If we looked at every single transaction, it would take us an army of people a year to look at that as well. So we do test work, so therefore we cannot obtain absolute assurance, and we are looking for things that are materially misstated, not every little misstatement that may be out there. We assess the accounting principles used in significant estimates made by management, and we evaluate the overall financial statement presentation. Once again, we've issued an unmodified or clean opinion, which is the highest level of opinion that can be given. And it basically says that the financial statements are reasonably stated in all material respects. There are some significant accounting policies that are adopted by the city. They are disclosed in note 1 of the financial statements. And if you read them, that's like accounting 101 for the city's statements. Included in those policies are the significant disclosures that we make, how deposits and investments are handled, long-term liabilities, and fund balance. Next slide, please. Not every item in the financial statements are developed based upon a dollar coming in or a dollar coming out. There are certain things that require judgment and estimates. And we look at those judgments and we look at those estimates for a number of things. One is, are they based on sound logic? The second is, are they consistent with industry practice? And third is, were they properly calculated based upon the factors that underlay them? With regard to the city, the primary significant management judgments and estimates, while there are others, were the OPEB liability and related amounts or other post-employment benefits, incurred but not reported claims liability, useful lives of capital assets, and pension liabilities and related amounts. And somehow we've gotten off the slides. If we could get back to slide 8. Okay. Some other items, we had no material uncorrected misstatements during the audit. In other words, things or journal entries that could have been made but were deemed not to be material to make. All misstatements detected as a result of our audit procedures are attached to our governance letter. Keep in mind that not all adjustments are a result of our audit. Because of the timing of the cutoff of the general ledger and audit procedures being done, management continually or may continually find adjustments that need to be made. If they provide us with adjustments, we do not consider them to be our audit adjustments. We had no disagreements with management regarding accounting, reporting, or other matters. We had difficulty in meeting the 12/31 deadline, and we had sent a letter to governance dated December 13th, 2019, outlining the fact that the statements would be late. And the primary issue there was just drafting the financial statements. Unlike prior years where there were issues with the general ledger itself, this year it was primarily a result of restructuring of certain accounts, restructuring of certain funds, and things of that nature. And the financial statements were issued by the end of January. We had no issues that we discussed with management prior to our retention as auditors. Term knowledge, no other consultations were made with other auditors, and there were no findings or issues discussed with or communicated to management. At the end of the audit, we asked management to provide us with the signed representation letter, which basically says you provided us all the information we asked for, you didn't hold anything back, and you were truthful in all of our inquiries. It takes about 6 pages to say all that, but we did receive the letter at the end. Next slide, please. As far as internal control matters are concerned, the internal control letter, we are not expressing an opinion on the internal controls. We only express an opinion on the financial statements, but we do consider the internal controls to determine the amount of testing that we need to do and to determine the control environment in which the city is operating. A material weakness would be a reasonable possibility that a material misstatement of financial statements would not be prevented or detected and corrected on a timely basis. That is a very large control weakness. A significant deficiency would be less significant than a material weakness, yet important enough to bring to your attention. We are not allowed to indicate whether we found any significant deficiencies. If we found none, we're not allowed to say that in writing. The best we can do is indicate that there were no material weaknesses identified. Next slide, please. The management letter.
Excuse me, you say you did not find any,
I'm sorry, what?
you did not find any material errors, or I don't know what the term is.
We did not find any material weaknesses.
Okay, yes, thank you, sir.
Certainly. With regard to the management letter, from time to time we come across deficiencies in internal control other than significant deficiencies and material weaknesses and other matters that we feel should be communicated to you and that you could use to increase or strengthen your internal control and the efficiency of your operations. There were a couple items noted. The first one was the year-end closing. Again, because we were unable to issue our opinion on the financial statements as of the December 31st deadline, we've included this comment once again. And we know that management has been making efforts and has been moving towards being able to meet that deadline. But we felt that we needed to make this comment once again. Next slide, please. Collateralization of bank accounts. The law requires that deposits in banks be collateralized with underlying securities, and that collateral be held in a certain manner. During the year, we noticed the city's cash accounts were not fully collateralized at June 30. The investment policy requires at least 102% collateralization of deposits. At one institution, the city was only 99% collateralized. Not a significant deficiency, not a significant amount of money, and that's the reason why we are calling it a management letter comment. Now, some things that could affect that: a last-minute deposit. If the bank wasn't expecting a deposit to come in and a large deposit came in at the end of the year, that could have an impact very easily. Again, we don't consider this to rise to the levels of significant deficiencies or material weakness. And then accounting procedures manual. The city doesn't have a written accounting procedures manual to formally document the regular procedures performed by the accounting department. We recommend that the city implement such a manual. Now, these things are very difficult to put together. They take a lot of time from a lot of people. There's been a lot of, or not a lot, but there's been turnover in the accounting department. There have been other priorities within the accounting department that have kept people from being able to complete a manual. But we do recommend that one be done. In the event that someone gets hit by the proverbial bus, there will be other folks who can understand what that individual did and how they did it.
Question, Keith. Al
Yes.
Kirchner. Is there any possibility that we can look for a model of some other municipality, either here in Maryland, somebody that has a best practice is that a possibility?
Well, you can certainly look to other jurisdictions. However, each jurisdiction is a bit different in how they do what they do and how they're structured. But it can't hurt to reach out to other jurisdictions to get their policies. But as far as procedures are concerned, they're probably going to be a little more specific to their jurisdiction, and you'd have to tailor those to yours.
Yeah, my concern surfaced at my work on a transition team on a previous administration, And it just seemed that the 4 department heads I worked with were not in consonance with one another about end of year funds, about transferring funds, about carryover and things like that. So that's always been a concern of mine, that we try to solve that.
Mr. Novak?
Yes.
If I might, probably my biggest concern about this is that this is about the 4th or 5th year in a row I'm reading that this hasn't been done. I suppose we're living proof that you don't have to have it done to have a reasonably good way of doing business, but how important is this?
Well, as I said, the importance is not when you're up and running and everything is going fine. The importance of it is when you have a long-term employee who suddenly leaves, or as I said, gets hit by the proverbial bus, gets ill, etc., and other folks have to basically pick up what they were doing. Sometimes learning what a person does is just as difficult as doing the job itself. The other thing is, when you have an accounting procedures manual and you're in the process of writing it, a lot of times you'll see things that you've been doing for years that maybe you don't need to be doing any longer. Or maybe you've got some incompatible duties that you hadn't seen before because people had not sat down and put pen to paper. The one downfall of procedures manuals is a lot of times once they're written, people put it on the shelf and forget about it. And a procedures manual is something that should be a living document and should be available from year to year, and should be updated from year to year.
So this is a reasonably strong recommendation at this point, I take it.
I would say so.
I mean, not that anybody's done anything terrible by not having one, but we really need to do this. Is that a good way of putting it?
I would say so. I think I would defer to management as to their ability to get it done in the near future.
Yeah.
However, it is something that I think would benefit the city in the long run.
Could be a priority.
Yeah. The other thing I'll say about this is there are jurisdictions that will hire a consultant to put together a procedures manual for them. And that is an expedited way of getting the work done, but it doesn't necessarily get all the benefits of individuals putting pen to paper and actually writing down and putting down what they're doing. And sometimes, as I said, there's a benefit to that that's a bit intrinsic. Sometimes you can mesh the two together to get it done quicker. But it is something that I think should be done sooner rather than later.
Thank you, sir.
Al Kirsten here with a comment. To your comment about ending up on a bookshelf, I agree and understand that, but at least it stands as a frame of reference when there's any kind of controversy or question. As a last straw, generally a person will take the manual off the shelf and see what the manual says. So I think there's a great benefit to that.
Okay. Yeah, my comment about being on the shelf was that it should be a living document, not something that is used as a bookend.
Mr. Chair, it's Ellie. In the absence of such, what is the finance department default to? Would it be appropriate for the finance director, Dickinson, to respond to that?
I believe she already has. We've asked her several progress reports, right?
There has to be some, I would assume that there's a procedure that we follow per the, I don't know the acronym for
So what I was going to add to it is that most of the staff that are here do have steps that they perform written down at their desk that documents what they do. It's just not all due for all steps. And I've instructed them to go through and document everything step by step, but you have to pull it together comprehensively, because when you do that, you find they're doing things that they don't need to be doing. That's my biggest concern, is we're doing things that are no longer needed, or we could streamline two processes and do them at the same time, or do something less frequently than we're doing it. And so I don't want you to think there's nothing written down anywhere. We also have several internal control policies that the previous finance director had pulled together. It's just those also need a review and probably a rewrite of some of them to match what we're doing now and the staffing that we have now. So it's not that there's nothing there, it's that it's not pulled together in a comprehensive format. So that we can make sure we're only doing what we need to do and that we are doing the things that we need to do.
Comment, Al Kirshner. I would just ask or urge that the department heads at least have some play in that process. I know it's going back 7 years ago, but on the Panelides transition team, it just seemed like there was a lot of, I don't want to say disagreement, but they were not in accord on what they thought was going on many of these financial transactions. Thank you.
All right.
Yeah, I have a comment to make. Thank you. Ms. Dickinson, not trying to put any pressure on you. Do you think we can have an accounting procedure manual completed by the end of the year? I'm not saying it has to be all I's dotted and all T's crossed, but do you think we can have one where we don't end up on the management letter next year?
That I can't tell you. I've got two vacancies now. I've got to keep one open for a while into next year. I'm trying to fill the other vacancy. And one of the things that would have helped tremendously in this respect is if we would have been able to have the assistant position filled. I don't know if you recall during the budget process, I had said that's one of the things I was going to come to council for an enhancement. So I could add that back to the staffing here and fill it with somebody who could take over the day-to-day operations of the office and free me up for stuff like this. And that I had to pull that off the table when the pandemic hit. So it would be difficult to get it done within the next year. Could be partially done. I could try to bring in somebody from the outside, but they also don't know the internal workings either. So it helps to have a broad knowledge of what's going on in the department before you try to write something like that.
I would add
If I
to
could
that,
just
that
add,
right,
look,
I would, oh, excuse me, Mr. Go ahead, Mr.
go ahead, go ahead. Go ahead, I'll go
No, what
after
I was
you.
gonna say, what was I gonna say was, you should have right here and now, at least 3 votes. Alderman Payon, who's our chair, to vote for that assistant position, Alderwoman Tierney, as well as myself, and I would suspect that the mayor as well. So if we can find one more vote so you can get that position, so we won't be on this management letter, I think we can somehow or another find the money for you to get that, at least that one position done. Or am I right, Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Thank you. You got it on the record.
There goes the hiring freeze for the budget.
If I could just make a couple of comments and then ask a question. The first comment is the description that Keith had of why we need this type of manual, where you have, somebody hit by a bus and not come in the next day. We sort of had that with our top 3 people in finance over the last few years, where we had those top 3 people just suddenly leave. So we certainly could have used this. We survived without it, but I'm very supportive of getting it done. I guess the question I would have is how fluid is this document as finance directors change? Are they able to insert their preferences for the way things are done into a manual like this? Keith, I guess the question's for you.
Well, Generally, when you have any change in management, be it a finance director or other department head that have financial transactions that enter into the flow, there may be changes that are made by that individual, either for reasons that they've identified efficiencies or identified weaknesses that they can shore up, because every individual who comes into a job brings something different with them, different experiences, different backgrounds, etc. So it would not be unusual for somebody coming into a new position at a higher level to make changes to those manuals as they go along, for things that they're seeing that may not have been seen in the past. I'm not sure if that answers your question.
It does, yeah. I mean, it's not just a static document that gets pulled out every 3 years. It can be a living document where the directors can kind of insert their preferences on the way things are done.
Yeah.
Sounds like.
One other thing I wanted to mention about the city, a lot of times people think of cities as not being complicated jurisdictions. And in some cases that may be true. But in the case of the city of Annapolis, you're a very complicated jurisdiction. There are a lot of moving parts. You have a lot of different things going on. And so you need to view yourself at that level of complexity when making decisions regarding things such as an accounting manual.
Mr. Chair, it's Ellie. Can I say two things?
Yes.
The first thing is, when I hear the word efficiency, I think of savings. And this is a position that I strongly support, in the sense that, for two reasons. It would free Jody up. You'd have this position where they could do the manual, which would introduce some efficiencies and be fluid, as the city manager suggests. But the second thing is, and I've noticed this the last couple of years, is that there's not really a person that can sit back and Al mentioned this, look at other jurisdictions, how our budget compares, and look at that kind of evaluation from a different perspective. Jody is caught up in the weeds most of the time. So this is a position where I am positive it would be in our benefit to look at our budget comparisons and predictions, and it would be an assistant finance director position. Again, it's an investment that would definitely save money in the long run. I just wanted to put a plug in that for that enhancement. How'd I do, Jody?
Plug noted.
A question. Is there any way, Mr. City Manager and Ms. Finance Director, that we can get this position up and running as soon as possible? I know we just passed the budget, but this, to me, I'm not going to use the word dire, but it's extraordinarily important, like Alderwoman Tierney indicated. Mr. City Manager, Ms. Finance Director.
It's difficult right now because of a couple of things. One, we have a big vacancy factor, as you know, that we have to achieve savings with vacancy. So adding another position just compounds that. And plus, it looks like we may lose, there's a chance we may lose half of our state pilot as well. So that will be another hit to our budget that we're gonna have to deal with. So this is a difficult time to start adding positions.
Mr. Novak, I have a question for you. You just heard the dilemma we're in. Do you have any suggestions that we could follow, short of hiring someone else or a consultant or mesh of the two?
About the only thing that I can suggest you do is what Jody has been doing, and that is getting individuals to document their processes and their procedures, and where time is available to start taking that information, consolidating it, and synthesizing it looking for things like processes that could be changed to create efficiencies, duplications of effort, and things of that nature. When you're in a dilemma such as yours, you have to prioritize your resources to where you're going to get the best bang for the buck. Now, the other thing I will add is that during our internal control processes during the year, we do create a documentation that is, or I should say, we jointly create with the accounting personnel documentation for our understanding of internal controls. And we have made that documentation available to Ms. Dickinson, for her use. So there are some things there. It's just not to the point where it could be, or to the point where, quite frankly, if you were to have a manual, it would be. And I think Jody articulated it very well. She's had her accounting folks start to put that information together, but it's not of the highest priority due to other things that they need to do to keep the city running and services provided.
It
All right.
sounds like, based on your initial comments, that maybe a retreat, a day or something here and there to try to pull it all together. But that's just a outside bird's eye view, but we can move on. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, we are a few minutes behind, so I would appreciate it if we could, Mr. Novak, if you have anything else you'd like to add, by all means, now's a good time to do it, and maybe we'll have a few more questions. I don't know.
No, not on that item. Do have a few more slides if I can.
Okay.
Proceed. Okay.
By all means.
Yeah. Next slide, please. Okay, the single audit is the audit of the federal awards. We look at what are deemed to be major programs, and there's a methodology for determining major programs. This year, the major program was the Homeland Security Grant Program, which had federal expenditures of $901,210. We issued an unmodified report on compliance for major programs. We found no non-compliance. The city was a low-risk auditee. This is the first year that the city is determined to be a low-risk auditee. The biggest effect is that as a low-risk auditee, we are only required to reach a coverage of 20% of the federal expenditures subject to testing. When you're other than a low-risk auditee, that percentage jumps to 40. Now, because of the size of the programs that the city receives and the number of programs that you receive, this Homeland Security grant was 42.78% of the total expenditures of the city. So we more than met the coverage that were required. Next slide. As far as GASB is concerned, next slide. The GASB, because of COVID-19, pushed off a lot of implementation dates. And so the new effective dates for upcoming GASB pronouncements, which may have an impact on the city, and those are highlighted. The first being GASB 84 on fiduciary activities. That won't be effective until fiscal 2021. And then GASB 87 on leases, that will not be effective until fiscal 2022. Originally, they were effective this year and next year, and now they'll be effective next year and the year after. And then the other big one that's out there is Statement 96, subscription-based information technology arrangements. That probably won't have an impact on the city. And that's basically if you are using cloud-based software as opposed to your own software that's internal to your system. So for the most part, nothing new this year. some things on the horizon. The really big one is for the city is probably going to be Statement 87 on leases, which won't be effective until 2022. Next slide. Okay, as far as financial statements are concerned, I just have a number of slides for you. Don't need to go into them in any great detail, other than to say sometimes when you're reading a financial statement, you can't see you can't see things as clearly as when you put them into a graphic or pictorial form. And this is simply a graphic format of a certain of the statements and certain other things. The first is the entity-wide statement and net position. This is all shown in thousands. I've presented 3 years here. I could easily present 4 or 5 years, but it just goes to show how net position has changed, how assets, deferred outflows, liabilities, and deferred inflows have changed throughout the year. Next slide. This is your entity-wide statement of changes in net position, again, showing where your revenues are coming from and showing your activity expenses, both for governmental activity and business type activities, and showing the overall change in net position. Again, this is simply for 3 years. Yes, ma'am.
Just a quick question. I'm looking at 2019 for our state share taxes and other, as well as miscellaneous and a couple of other columns, and it looks like we dipped a bit from 2018 to 2019. In 25 words or less, any comments?
Nothing significant comes to mind at this point in time. There were certain reclassifications that were made during the year, which may have impacted those items. I think Jody would be better apt to answer those questions.
Yes, I can tell you, of course, with the property taxes, you remember in 19, there was an increase in the rate and an increase in assessed value, which it's caused that increase. On the state shared taxes, in 18, I don't know if you recall us talking about the state income tax that we get throughout the year. We had a very large November of 17 distribution, which we thought was a normal growth in our income tax distribution, but turned out the next November did not realize nearly as much income tax. And a lot of that one that came in with November 17, which is in our 18 year, that was some capital gains related transactions that caused that, and they didn't reoccur in 19. So the major cause of that dip in state shared and other was the drop in the state income taxes. We were under budget in 19 for that item. It's come back up since, but that year we were under budget. And what else did you call attention to? Miscellaneous, that I'd have to, if you see that $3 million for in 18, that was when we sold the land, the golf course to fund the pool. That's what made that $3 million number jump up, which makes our 19 number look small in comparison. And which other ones did you?
Operating grants and capital grants.
Those vary considerably. It would be hard to say without, this is a picture of the entire city together, so it is comparable. I mean, we have taken the grants out of the general fund, but this is putting those funds all together. The operating grants go up and down depending on our awards, and I would have to look at the detail on that one. I couldn't tell you off the top of my head. That and the capital grants. I don't know off the top.
Charges for services, and that's the last one I'll ask about.
Charges for services. That one I would have to look into too.
Okay, it's no big deal. I didn't know if there was something major that happened amongst any of them.
And okay. So can I ask Mr. Novak, these are the numbers then for the entity wide, which includes both the utility operations and the governmental operations?
Yeah, this would have been everything.
All right, so this got utilities in there too, so I'd have to take a look at those funds as well.
Okay, no, I didn't know if there was something outstanding that had happened, but just, okay, that's fine, thank you.
All right, are there any other questions of Mr. Novak?
Next slide. This is just a general fund revenue and expenditure summary. Again, this shows the property tax increase of 7 million due to the 9-cent increase in the rate and 3% increase in assessed value. And it shows the intergovernmental decrease by 7.2 million, primarily due to reclassification of grants. Next slide. This just gives you an idea of where the general fund revenue is coming from in relation to each other. And as you can see, property taxes is the most significant portion, followed by intergovernmental, which would be your grants and items of that nature. And there are some other areas as well. But property taxes by far is the largest. Next slide.
Keith, wait, Keith.
Yes.
Can, going back to that last slide, one of the things that I've been pondering are the large portion of grants. How do we as a city compare to other entities that you're auditing in terms of the source of grant revenues as our second biggest source of revenue?
Well, I'd have to do a little more research to answer that question because every jurisdiction is different. You know, if you were, let's say, a more rural city, the intergovernmental probably wouldn't be as large a portion. If you were a more urban area, you may have a much larger portion. So you really have to, you know, compare yourself to the same type of jurisdiction. And that's a hard thing to do in Maryland, especially considering the fact that Maryland does not have a large amount of municipal jurisdictions comparable to the city of Annapolis.
Thank you.
Next slide. This will give you an idea of where your general fund expenditures
Question?
are. Yes.
I'm sorry, I may have missed it earlier, but on the one previous slide that we just moved from, yeah, property, that one. Did a previous slide tell what percentages those were of the total revenue?
No, but I can certainly provide that to you.
Yeah, if you could, like where it says property taxes, maybe in brackets, just put what percentage that is. That would be
Sure.
helpful.
It's
Thank
not
you.
a problem at all.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
It's 62, at 19, it was 62%.
We just let him continue.
Okay, it's in the CAFR, it's in the management discussion and analysis piece in those tables there.
Yeah, I can add those percentages to these slides and then provide them to Jody and she can forward them as need be.
Not necessary. If it's already somewhere else, I'll look at it there. No, I don't want to create.
Okay.
What
Right.
page is that on, Jody?
But Keith, on that note, are you going to be able to send us both these slides and the audit report?
Well, the slides themselves have been provided to the city. They were just completed late last week. So Jody does have copies of these slides. I would certainly, welcome the opportunity to provide them to you. However, I believe Jody could probably forward them to you just as easily.
Ross, I got mine last week. Yeah.
Okay. Via an email that I didn't read, apparently. So anyway, I mean, Jody or David, if we can get the slides and the audit report, that would be good.
The audit report would have been sent to you at the end of January with all the documents that he's referring to today. I'll be glad to send it to you again, Ross.
Yes, if you would, please. I don't doubt for a minute.
Okay, that's all right. I understand.
Jody, could you send it to me also, please? I think everybody on the finance committee, well, Fred will have it, but I think we should all have it.
Pretty sure I do have it.
Yeah.
Didn't the audit committee receive that in the last few days as well?
I didn't get it the last few days. I think I got it quite some time ago.
I got something
I'll
last
check.
week. I got that last week.
I'll check.
Mhm.
May I ask a question, Fred, about the slide that's up now as Mr.
Sure.
Novak, or for Mr. Novak? I'd like to know what's included in community services. And I hope that question wasn't already answered while I was sending text.
I think there must be a mistake here because public safety, anyways, I'll let Keith answer that, but I think that there might be a mix up with the public safety and community services.
Yeah, I agree with you. I'll have to take another look at this slide.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it looks like community services and public works is reversed. And that's a vacuum in the background.
Yeah.
Well, I would have thought public safety would have come under community services also. So I'm sure that's what's gonna,
Yeah.
Mr. Novak will revisit.
I will certainly revisit that.
Thank you.
Okay. The next two slides are simply budget to actual comparisons for general fund revenues and expenditures. As you can see, your actuals were very close to final budget with regard to revenues. And if you could go to expenditures, next slide, same thing. In fact, you were generally under budget with regard to expenditures. Then if you could skip to slide 25. Okay, some things that we're seeing from an industry standpoint, some new challenges, staff turnover and recruitment, as we've seen, unfunded OPEB and pension or retirement liabilities, budget pressures, rising healthcare costs, and then COVID-19 we see as a big issue this year affecting all of our governmental clients. One of the things that we're doing differently now is we are doing a lot more off-site auditing, having meetings in format similar to the meeting we're having this morning with management as well as department heads, getting information electronically and minimizing our time on site to protect both our people as well as city personnel. In times such as this, we want to minimize that face-to-face contact to keep everybody safe. So there are some things that are happening now that are a little different than what had been done in the past. The good part about it is we have been setting up to be able to do this type of auditing for a number of years, and we've actually utilized it on some very large clients over the past 3 to 5 years. So when COVID-19 hit and we had to convert over to more of an off-site process, if you will, it wasn't a huge issue for us because we had already laid the groundwork to do it. And then some future activities, property tax assessments and construction activity. Those are things that, just happen and have happened considerably throughout. So with that, next slide, I'd be more than happy to try to answer any other questions that you may have.
Any questions from the committee or from anyone else?
Fred, I do have a question.
Okay, Alderwoman Finlayson.
Thank you. Mr. Novak, my question relates to OPEB post-employment obligations. Is there a trend, or what is the trend? We know that the costs continue to rise, but how are others dealing with the rise in post-employment cost?
Well, you have to keep in mind when you're looking at OPEB, there are two items you're looking at. The first is the assets you're accumulating, and the second is the liability that's accumulating. So you've got to look at the two of those separately because each of them have different factors affecting them. So if we look at the investments in the first place, investments are going to rise and fall with what's happening in the market. There's not a whole heck of a lot you can do there other than to utilize good investment advisors to give you the best advice possible, to try to keep you off of the shores in tough times and sail into the horizon in really good times, so that you maximize your returns there. The other side, the liability side, is a more controllable side. And that is by looking at the benefits that are being provided, looking at the way you're providing those benefits, and looking at all the various factors that are going into the provision of those benefits. You know, at what age are you, are you allowing people to retire? What's the benefit you're giving? And those all become more policy issues than anything else. And, you know, a lot of times, well, not a lot of times, but it's very hard to take benefits away once you've given them. However, working with, plan providers and people who design these plans, there are certain things that may be able to be done to the current plan to enhance it. But then going forward, there may be changes that we may want to make for future employees to help lessen the impact going down the road. The history of OPEB is that those benefits were given out at a time when healthcare costs were relatively low. And were not rising at the rates they're rising now. And in a lot of cases, they were given out in lieu of wage increases because the money wasn't there necessarily to give out the wage increases that people were seeking. So really what you need to do is look at the design of the plan and determine from a policy standpoint whether it's designed the way you wish it to be designed, and whether there are changes that can be made both currently but also going forward.
Thank you for that. David, could we, City Manager Gerald, could you put on your list for bargaining a discussion about future benefits? And I'm talking about a genuine, we're talking bargaining, but when we used interest-based bargaining, we got a buy-in from everyone. And I would hope that we could have a similar discussion about our post-employment cost in the out years. Because I think it would be of value to everyone around the table to be part of that genuine discussion. So, I don't remember when we go back into bargaining, whether it's next year or the year after, but I would like for that to be one of the discussion topics.
Okay, yeah, absolutely. I think 2 years, we have 2 more years of the current agreement. So I guess that second year we'll go back.
Well, it may be worth beginning a discussion sooner because it's going to be a lengthy discussion.
I agree.
Yeah, so thank you.
Mr. Chair?
Yes. Hello.
Are you there?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm here.
Okay. City Manager Gerald, didn't we make an improvement on health insurance in this budget?
We did, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's good. And then my question is to the consultant. I was just curious, is that what you mean on, I think, page 8, where you said I was curious because you classified the OPEB liability as a management judgment and estimate. And I just wanted you to speak to that just for a second. Is that what you mean, that it's more of a judgment on how we handle it?
Well, it's not a judgment on how you handle it. It's a judgment on how the amount of the liability is determined. Again, if you had revenues coming in or expenditures going out that were dollar driven, in other words, I pay $1, I record $1, I receive $1, I record $1. That's an easy thing to do. When it comes to OPEB, however, you require actuarial valuations to be performed by outside experts to determine what the liability is. And for those who may not be as familiar with actuarial calculations, they're effectively a huge present value calculation of what the liability is today to provide future benefits tomorrow. And so you're estimating things like what's the growth rate going to be? How long are people going to live? What is the turnover of those individuals? So there's a whole lot of moving parts that go into determining that liability that, nobody can know for certain what the end result of those items is going to be. So it's a huge estimate of what we think is going to happen based upon actuarial methodology and actuarial standards. And so that's why we call it a judgment and an estimate.
So who makes that, City Manager Gerald, who sits back and makes that decision or that judgment?
Jody, do you know the answer?
So as far as what, we have an actuary that we hired and they come to us to do the calculation, and management helps set the assumptions that we're going to use. But the actuary typically helps guide us there based on what's currently happening. And they will look at our salary increase history to try to determine how the salaries will increase over time. Because as you know, some of those liabilities on the pension side are based on salary levels. So you have to anticipate future salaries. They also are going to tell us what are the industry norms for projecting healthcare increases where OPEB is concerned. They're trying to determine how much healthcare costs are going to increase into the future. And that's where we use their expertise to try to determine which assumption we're going to follow. It's important for both pension and OPEB to determine mortality rates. And that also is something we depend on the actuary to point us to. And if you remember, we have been using, on the pension side, we've been using old mortality tables. People are living longer and we needed to switch to the longer mortality tables, which is something that's impacting our pension liability right now. So it's a combination of, it's management's decision ultimately what assumptions you're going to use, but we depend a lot on the expertise of the actuary to tell us what's the best practice and what they're seeing with the trends.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Yes, Jim.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a quick question for Keith and Sean. Back in the required communication section, you address an issue about delays and a letter sent in December. I want to ensure that those communications, you're including the chair of the audit committee in those communications.
I believe that's who they were addressed to.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So I know we had an issue with a lack of communication for the FY18 audit.
There was, yeah.
And I want to ensure that your firm CLA is aware of the existence of the audit committee and the position of the chair of the audit committee as a contact, a point of contact for your firm with regards to the audits.
We are.
That was remedied rather quickly, and in no small part thanks to your inquiry. So I think I don't think we've had a problem since.
Very well.
Since that time, Jim.
Thank you.
Is there any other
questions? That's all I had. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions? Well, thank you very much again, Keith, for coming down for your enlightening presentation. I was going to say look forward to seeing you down here next year, but maybe not.
Maybe in the audience.
Okay. Let's hope not.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Novak.
Okay.
Thank you.
And
Thank
Mr.
you.
Walker, thank you.
Good luck on your retirement.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, well, my wife is the one who really needs the luck.
Oh my God, yes, she does.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
The next item on the agenda is old business. The annual report. Yes, the old annual report from 2019. It has been filed. It was filed several weeks ago. I think there was a little bit of a misunderstanding between Kim and myself, which was quickly remedied, and Kim filed the report. I think might have been the very next day, Jim, after we spoke about a month or 6 weeks ago. I do not intend to let that happen again. It's not happened in the past. It should be filed typically by February or March, like most other committees. And it can be filed in January as far as I'm concerned. We really, I need to do a better job of that. I think we're all aware that I was a little preoccupied with some other things, but no excuses. Won't happen again. Did you have your hand up, Alderwoman Finlayson?
I just want to thank Kim for a wonderful report. Great report.
Yes, and you can add to that Mr. Kirshner, who actually wrote up the better part of that report himself. And I don't want to take anything away from Kim, but Al did a great job, and we finally got it done. That's not the. I think we all know that's not the way to do it, and we will have it done immediately. That brings up the quarterly reports for 2020. We have had, well, we haven't been able to get a lot done, largely, in large part due to the COVID-19. I had hoped to have the second part, second quarter written up for today's meeting. I do not. The first part of the meeting is basically, the first part of the report, or the report for the first quarter, is basically going to say something to the effect of, we really didn't get anything done because we couldn't get anything done due to numerous facilities being closed, the government, city government generally being in the process of closing down really from the 1st of March on. But having said that, I was tempted to say we won't file one, but the ordinance says we file one. We should file one. Even if it doesn't say anything, we should file one, and that's what I intend to do. Any questions about that? The next part of the agenda is, let's see. Why don't we bump ahead to the city manager and the city finance director? Dave, I've talked about this with one or two members of the board, and actually one or two members not on our commission. And we'd like to get something in writing from you for our meetings. We will not be meeting every month, although you do file a city manager's report every month. It was brought to my attention that nobody can find reports that the city manager has given to the finance committee over the years. Very difficult to find on our website. Matter of fact, most people can't find any on the website. And I strongly suspect the reason for that is because it doesn't exist on our website. And that's something I want to, I want to take care of that. Again, even if you don't have a whole lot to say, I think it's better that we have something in writing, and you know, we'll call it a day or make necessary adjustments about the content of any report that you filed.
Okay,
Jody,
just so-
like to say the same thing. You know, you give lots of reports, and I don't usually care if you use parts of reports you've given to other committees. When you report to us, I think it's inevitable. Excuse me, and it's not, there's nothing really wrong with doing that because that's what you've been doing for the last month or two. Any questions or comments?
No, I guess I'm just so I understand. So what you're asking for is before each of these meetings, you want a report from me and from, I guess, the city attorney and from the finance director.
Not the city attorney. The main reason, aside from the fact you both deal with the very essence of what this committee is about, is that by statute, you have to give a report, even though you're not part of the committee technically. And, you know, if you're going to give a report, it might as well be in writing. It doesn't have to be, you know, your magnus opum or anything like that.
The only reason I ask about the city attorney is on the agenda under management reports, it's city attorney, city finance director, and city manager. So I thought each of those three would fall under the same sort of requirement.
Well, we've never had the city attorney at these meetings unless we invited them. There was an issue. There have been a couple of issues. When your predecessor was here and we needed legal advice. And I don't think, although I don't believe it was Mr. Lyles who was here, I believe it was before he was here. We had one of the assistants come up and talk to us. Jody, do you have any questions about?
Yeah. So I'll just say, as far as the committee reports, Finance Committee, Audit Committee, FAC, when I do a report, and I guess it was this way with my predecessor, it was always just an oral report of what we've been doing in the finance department from the point of the last meeting to this meeting. And you're saying if you're going to do a report, you might as well write it down. But remember, writing it down, you have to write it down and then you have to say it. So that's twice the time at least. So just FYI, it's a good thing to do. I'm just telling, it does take time. So it's not the same as giving.
Well, let's see how it goes. And if it takes, you know, too much time and we don't get enough out of it, we can certainly make a judgment.
So, and this goes to the point of, we've got a city manager report going out monthly. I haven't been as good about giving my contribution to that report, but you got a city manager report going out monthly and then having to write something separately for other committees.
Well, yes, but it doesn't have to be totally different by any means. I mean, sometimes it might be the identical report. I don't know. I mean, basically your report is what's going on in the finance office, what's going on financially in the city that the audit committee ought to know about. And frankly, we ought to know about almost everything that's going on because it does affect the work that we're charged to do by statute.
Mr. Chair?
I don't know how additional work it'll really end up being.
Mr. Chair, I think
Yes.
I think it's coming across as additional work because of the separate reporting. Wouldn't the city manager report, where the departments report to him to put this report together, wouldn't that suffice? Because I imagine with our quarterly meetings, we would have that.
Let's talk about it. That's what I had in mind, that it would be, you know,
The city manager.
Largely similar, if not identical, to the city manager's report. I would hope it wouldn't be identical, but if it were mostly the same, I don't have any problem with that. And there are times when probably identical is absolutely appropriate. I just want something there. When people ask me what was in the city manager's report to the audit committee last month, I couldn't find it.
Okay, so that's well, let's resolve that. Is there a city manager report that's updated monthly, city manager Jarrell?
Yeah, there is. I'm not sure that that's the appropriate report for this. That's
okay.
A report, a very detailed report from each of the departments. I'll just pick out pieces of what I want to talk about for this and put it in writing and submit it and then talk
Okay.
about it.
I just
I'm
didn't
not
want more
looking,
work.
not looking for your senior paper, you know, from graduate school or anything.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Alderwoman Pendel Charles.
Thank you,
Who's next?
Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think it's a burden. We on our end, we're not even doing what we are tasked to do. So to ask Ms. Dickinson to put together a report, I think is a burden. And then we don't have, she doesn't have an assistant. So until we kind of get what we need on her staff, and we've been deficient on our end of doing reports, I think it's unfair to ask her to do extra work. It's been working to give the oral report. As far as I'm concerned, the oral report is good. Let's lay it to rest until we get her some help.
I totally agree. I totally agree. The oral report is fine.
Mr. Chair,
Yes,
you'll recall we had a similar discussion a few weeks ago offline.
yeah.
Since this committee was stood up, we've had a heck of a lot of problems just staying within a one and a half hour time frame. And I've often felt that in the interest of the department heads and the city manager, trying to please us and make us happy has given us detail far and beyond the scope of the audit committee. So I'd like to see that thing shrunk down. Verbal to me is okay. A digest of another report to such as to the city manager or to the mayor is fine. And we're just running up the tab on labor in this organization.
What about just some notes?
No, I'm just saying a good verbal report is fine with me. But when I see some of these meetings where we have people $65 to $100 an hour, you know, tied up for 2 or 3 hours, I have to ask the value of that. So I would like to see a good digest. Over.
Well, if it's the committee's sense not to do that, then I won't. I don't take any joy out of it. I mean, I don't think my feelings certainly aren't hurt.
My point is let's get the information that would be certainly of interest to the audit committee and let everything else go. We've gotten very, very detailed reports in the past on status of hirings and things like that, that really we ought not be, we don't need to be concerned about. So that was,
right.
Thank you.
And I just want to add that those reports will be, those oral reports will be memorialized in the meeting minutes.
Hopefully. Yep.
Especially with Kim's very thorough reporting of the minutes.
They are very thorough, no doubt about it.
Here, here, absolutely.
Okay. Then let's move on. We won't worry about oral reports at this juncture. Okay, we have just a couple more things I'd like to cover, but they are fairly important. Let's talk about the RFP. Jody, can you tell us where we are?
Yeah, well, where we were last, we have it drafted. We gave it to you at the last meeting. And then there was a robust debate about whether or not you wanted to go that direction or do some other type of audit. So it's kind of in your hands. That's waiting to go with your comments and feedback. And yeah, we're just waiting to hear what direction you want to go. We have a limited budget for it next year. So it's not like we could open up a wide performance-based audit of any one or two departments. So it's going to have to be fairly.
Well, I believe there are a couple of us that expressed concern and general fondness for having a performance audit. And there were a couple of us that did not feel that way. Where do you want to go? Floor is yours. Anybody who wants it. Don't everybody speak at once.
Kirshner here. I have advocated performance audits all along so we can find out what the value of our dollar spent is.
Well,
and I can continue to have that as my belief is the wisest use of this money with probably the best possible benefit.
To tell you the truth, I question what the purpose of the committee is if we're not going to be able to do that. not necessarily all the time with every audit, but certainly with some of the audits. I mean, we go out and spend $30,000 on an audit, look at it and say, gee, does this tell us where we're wasting money or how we can save money? And if the answer isn't hell yeah, I'm not sure we've spent the money wisely, at least in some cases. Rhonda.
Yeah, we can only do what the budget allows. That's my point. Whatever the budget allows, that's all we can do.
Yeah, okay. Anybody else? Ross?
Thanks.
Alderman Burnett.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Speaking of the audit, I don't know why I have such a terrible echo.
Would everybody on mute, please, so we don't get the echo?
Yeah, you sound bad enough the first time.
Most of us who are not on the audit committee have yet to see the first audit, the results of Parks, Rex and Park.
We're getting to that.
Oh, okay. Be nice to see what the audit that was done looks like before we talk about what next audits would look like. See how useful that audit was.
Mr. Chair, are we talking about the RFP or what? I just had a question on the RFP. Is this
Fred,
about?
Alderman Payon, you're muted. You're muted.
That's why I can only hear myself. Thank you. I intended by the end of the meeting to make that public. I think Jody, all we have left to do is to basically formally accept it. Isn't that correct? Is that correct?
So I think you may have formally accepted it at the last meeting. I gave you the final revision from the firm, and I thought we took a vote on it last time. You can check the minutes to see. If not, yes, you would need to formally.
I didn't see it in the minutes, but then I didn't look very carefully. At any rate, I had in mind that when we get out of here, we could give, the council a copy of whatever it is we have. But let's get back to the performance audit. Do I hear a motion? At this point now, the performance audit would be in all likelihood of either transportation or planning and zoning, because the RFPs are for both of those. I don't anticipate being able to do both. As a matter of fact, for any sort of a detailed performance audit, I think we'll be damn lucky to have enough money to do one of them. But be that as it may, I think we ought to indicate what we want to do. I can sit down with Jody and with purchasing, Mr. Schneider, and get this out and rolling. Go ahead.
Oh, Mr. Chair, thank you. The draft that I'm looking at, I think I brought this up last time, and I know Brian is most likely aware of it, but the boilerplate is not applicable for an auditor. It's a boilerplate for a construction project of some sort. It just has to be tailored to it has to be tailored for this.
Right.
For this.
We talked about that, I think.
Yeah, I just didn't want that to get lost.
I know, and we did go through and make some edits on that. So let me make sure that we get the edits back to you. But again, it reads as if it's an audit of internal controls or cash handling. So if you're going to go a different direction, it's important to describe pretty specifically what your objectives are, which department and what are the objectives, and not just a performance audit. You're going to have to say, give them to what performance standards are you holding them up to, and which ones do you want to be evaluated, because your budget for the audit is not going to cover it.
Totally agree.
And so you're going to have to say, are we performing in accordance with this? Are we doing this? And I can't give you examples because I don't know what department you want, but you'd have to zero in on certain factors of their operations.
Yeah, I'm speaking more of it, asking for a pre-bid conference and asking for workman's comp insurance. So that's,
Okay.
yeah, that stuff.
All right, I'm going to be out of town at the end of this week and into the middle of next week, but hopefully when we get back, several of us can sit down and get this rolling. The last thing, let's see. Yes, the last thing that I think we have on our docket for today is a little bit of a change of course. I've thought long and hard, and I've had the opportunity to speak to one or two of you about this, both on and off the audit committee. And I'm thinking that the way we can have the biggest impact is to, and the way that I think we can get the most done in general, is to go after, and by go after, I mean study, not necessarily, try to find terrible things. That's not what I'm talking about. But go after individual projects that are much smaller in scope, that they're not going to cost us $50,000 to audit, that who knows, we may be able to come up with the information we need ourselves. For instance, would be one that Mr. Kirshner came up with, a number of things in the police department. How many cars do we have? Does anybody know how many cars we have? Dave, I think, does, but most of us don't. How much do we spend? How much could we possibly save? Are we renting? Are we buying? Are we doing? It's just generally question projects, which in and of themselves are at least moderately expensive. And, I think it's something, and I'm just using this as an example because it could be perfectly in totally perfect order for all we know. But by looking at things like that, I think we have a better opportunity of saving money. Do we buy gasoline from the same place the county does? Do we, that kind of thing. And we could even maybe, boy, this is a can of worms, but the possibility of looking into police overtime, just as an individual project. We're not spending $50,000 or $100,000 on auditing the police department, yet there are a lot of benefits to be had. And I think mostly we're going to find that things are being done the right way, but I think it's something that a committee our size can do. I mean, there are only, how many of us? 7, and some have full-time jobs, some don't. And I think this is a good way to make things up. One of the projects, I already have a second project definitively in mind to follow, and to make sure the public knows where their money is being spent. And the more I think about it, I think it's a much better way of doing business, combining it with the occasional departmental, entire departmental oversight that an audit would take care of. Yes, Alderwoman Pendel Charles.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think either was last year or the year before, when the police department, we went through the process of determining vehicles and new vehicles and types of vehicles we were going to purchase, how many, what the layout was going to be over the next couple of years. We did a pretty exhaustive assessment of that. Am I right, Director of Finance?
I don't.
So I don't know about at the time, I think you were working on the union agreement, the police union, and they were interested in vehicles and took lower COLAs as compensation these last couple of years. And we have, over the last couple of years, used an equipment line, equipment borrowing that we took out to provide those take-home vehicles. So in the past couple of years, we have provided the police the police, the uniformed police with take-home vehicles. And that was part of their union contract. So there have been a lot added lately. And that was a part of that union process to get them to take home.
For what it's worth, and very much to City Manager Gerald's credit, I think within 3 days, Dave, I had not quite, but almost all the information that I'd asked for. We haven't had time to sit down and analyze it. And there may be some other things that we want and need. And a lot of the things that I would like to look at are readily available. There are lots of things we can talk about. As a matter of fact, I would invite every member of this committee to think of a project that you think would be worth looking at. I understand there's a little bit of work going on Main Street today. Did I hear that correctly? Well, if so, or if not, I mean, we got to look at the timing of things, but how many keep getting questions about, how much the phantom bike path cost us to put in to plan ahead, the one from 2 or 3 years ago? I do. How much did that cost us? Well, frankly, I don't know. You think we could find out? Yeah, I do. And I think, getting to the bottom of things like that, I think it would be a real plus in addition to some of the things that we're doing now. I mean, for those of us that were on this committee from the beginning, we sat around trying to figure out things to do because by the way, we do have an ordinance going in this week, which expands our role. But one member in particular and the then city manager read things absolutely literally, and it gave us literally almost nothing to do. The council, I think, as a whole, would be shocked if they knew how little the original empowering ordinance, gave us. And I'm changing that. I didn't think it was. I chose not to read it literally like some people did, but that's the way some people read it. I didn't, but other people did. And that's a legitimate way of reading it. I mean, frankly, I got tired and somewhat embarrassed of showing up for a meeting with nothing really new to report. And I think this way we can make a huge contribution to the city on an individual basis. Yes, Alderwoman Pendel Charles.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Two notes. As far as the overtime with the police, we have to recognize at least a particular one particular day, we had 2 protests. So we've had protests every week, and we're the capital city. We know we're going to have protests, and that's a constitutional right that I would dare not touch, and that we need law enforcement protection. The other thing is about the bike path. If my memory serves me correctly, I saw a figure. It either was $23,000 or $24,000, but I could be totally wrong about the bike path. So before we kind of go down the proverbial, okay, thank you, Alderman Arnett, you're shaking your head. And that's fine. My memory does not serve me well. But once we start going down these proverbial paths, we need to take a look at what we've already done to look at some of these things, and how COVID especially has impacted a lot of this. So this may not be the most ideal time to look at some of these. I'm not saying we shouldn't look at any of them, but COVID has impacted pretty much everything. And I was pretty enlightened this morning to hear from Mr. Novak, even how it has impacted some of those things that they do from an auditing standpoint. So
I agree with you. We've got to take a look at what the situation is all around us, no matter what we dig into, if anything. So, yes, Alderman Kirshner. All right. Sorry, Mr. Kirshner.
Just to put some context about the cars, my interest began, as many have recognized, the police cars, I believe, were part of a bargaining agreement. And my interest is, I would like to know how the figures that were thrown about during the bargaining process compare with actual costs today. So that's my interest in this thing. It's not about whether we should or shouldn't have done it. My question is, what is the real cost of the police cars? That's number one. The other thing I want to kind of tell everybody that I'm concerned about is the optics of the audit committee. I don't think we should be viewed as running around doing fishing trips,
Right.
and looking for problems. I think the audit committee really needs to sit down, get a handle on what it can and can't do on its current budget. What are the things that are most pressing needs? How can we accomplish things cheaper? And the last thing, in kind of jumping to endorse a comment by Alderwoman Pindell Charles, we are the capital, and what we should be doing is, would everybody please mute? I'm getting an echo here. Thank you. What we should be doing is keeping track of these costs so that when we negotiate with the state on our pilot or whatever that in other words, payments in lieu of taxes or whatever, that we have accurate figures that we can give the state to justify an increase. It's a very small and I think unfair reimbursement from the state. That's my opinion. But when we have growth like we've had due to COVID-19 and the protests, I think we should carefully track those dollars and make sure that we use them to our advantage, those numbers to our advantage. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, you're on mute, but I just want to say thank you for the invitation this morning. I've got to jump off because I have another meeting. So thank you, and I'll see you on Wednesday.
Don't jump too far. I don't want to see that boot again.
I'll be
And
gentle.
by the way, I'll be on my way to Deep Creek Lake Wednesday. I've already told our chairman, so.
Oh, good. We can get a lot done then.
Yeah, probably.
Mr. Kirshner, I'd like to kind of just add a couple of words about what you indicated. We all know that the city should be reimbursed even more. That's not even an issue. And from my understanding, we've provided much documentation concerning that. But in many ways, we're at the mercy of whomever, and I'm not gonna call any names, but I think we've done a yeoman job to try to get that increased. And I guess maybe Alderman Arnett may be able to add to that, but we've done everything but flip up and down over walls. And from what my understanding is, to try to get more, and it just isn't happening. And maybe Mr. Gerald can provide more information on that, but we've done everything calisthenically within our ability to try to do it. It's just, for whatever reason, and I'm not gonna disparage anybody, we just have not been able to get what we believe we think we're entitled to.
My question to you then is, what is the number? If these protests have cost us dollars, what is that number?
I'm not the finance director nor the city manager,
Well,
so I can't give you the number.
does anybody know the number?
Well, we can certainly get the number. I think the bigger issue is that the cost to have the state government here in Annapolis is higher than what we get paid as part of the pilot. And it's several $1 million is what we ask for each year. And then we feel lucky if we get the $750,000 that we have been getting. And we only got that this year because the legislator put it back into the budget because the governor took it out, even though there was legislation passed by the state that locked that in. And oh, by the way, the governor has proposed to the Board of Public Works that be cut in half because of the state's budget issues. So it may drop down to 375. I mentioned that in passing earlier, but that's what's going on, is that the governor has proposed that be cut. But we can certainly get these one-time costs for the protests. We've had to incur a lot of overtime to do that, but those are costs that you have to incur. It's like snow removal. You can't say, well, we don't have enough overtime budget to do that. That needs to be supported, and it has been supported, and we can certainly get those costs.
Maybe we need a protest for that. Maybe we need to, Mr. Kirshner, maybe we all need to get together and march up Main Street for that. I'm not being funny. I'm just saying.
It's been going on for years, and it goes back many administrations. So it's a fairly straight line track record, except with the news that the city manager just gave us. And I would actually expect that, I mean, everybody's hurting. I'm a volunteer firefighter up at Cape St. Clair. We just had our station renovation cut, and it's dire need. There's a million solid reasons we need a new fire station, and it got cut. COVID-19 was not in the grand plan, and we had to beat that first, and whatever it costs is what we had to do, and everybody's going to feel the pain. Thank you.
All right, guys.
Thank you.
The both the big hand and the little hand are appear to be on the 9 right now. I'd like to
I
wrap
have a
this up.
question, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, did we go over the ordinance and update on the subcommittee?
We did
Did
not,
we-
because it's already been it's in the hands of the city attorney's office right now, and I thought that we had gone over this in a past meeting.
Would everybody please mute?
I thought we had been over this in a past meeting. It is in the city attorney's hands, of course. Before it leaves the city attorney's hands, we'll have every opportunity in the world to look at this, and I'm certainly hoping for your support and Alderwoman Tierney's support at a minimum when we take this to the council as a whole.
The other thing I have to ask, on new business, you have education, 25 words or less. What is that?
What we got, a lecture from today, CLA. In the future, we hope to get a speaker for every meeting, or at least every other meeting. Probably a much shorter speaker, 15 minutes plus questions, maybe a few minutes longer than that. That's what we've talked about in the past. That was former Alderman Littman's idea, and I think it's a very good one. It's tough to find speakers on this, specific subjects that we're dealing with, but that's okay. We'll just do the best we can.
Okay. Now, thank you.
Okay. Is there anybody else?
For future speakers, I would say that maybe the county auditor would be a good future speaker to have on particular topics and sort of how their role is
Second,
at the county.
definitely.
Yeah.
Thank you, Julie. Great.
I mean, who is the county auditor now?
Thank you, Julie.
Susie Smith?
Okay.
Great idea. Thank you, Julie.
All right. For those of you who are unaware of it, today is Julie's last meeting with us. I would like to take this opportunity to thank you for your efforts. You're at the getting off the ground stage, regrettably, which means we don't really have a lot to show for your time, but it isn't because of for want of effort on anybody's part. And best of luck.
Thank you, Julie.
Thank you. No, it's been a pleasure serving with you all.
Okay, man. Don't think you're off the hook. I got your phone number. All right.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
just in
By the way,
response,
don't forget. I'd really like to get a couple of ideas for subjects that you think we might be able to take a look at and could be important in helping to run the city
Sure,
for the next
happy to do
meeting.
it.
oh, and also Julie, if you know somebody that would be interested in taking your spot.
Sorry, I will work on that.
Yeah, who are you angry
Great
with
point,
this
Al.
week?
Great point.
Let's
So,
find out what Julie's mad at.
Mr. Chair, I just wanted to address, I saw an email this weekend, and I just think it would be necessary for the city manager to just address the monitoring of the COVID expenses, just to ensure those that are curious that these costs under COVID are being managed and accounted for. That's a fair statement, City Manager Jarrell? Maybe he didn't hear that.
Maybe he's no longer here.
Oh,
I don't see him on.
Yeah.
oh, okay. All right. Yeah, I just,
He had another
Well,
meeting.
well,
kinda
Finance
like-
Director can
I'd
answer
like
that
to
too.
stay away from COVID expenses
Okay.
as I can, because we
Okay,
have a way of being estimated to be real high one week and real low the next. And I'd rather do something that's a little steadier if we can. I'm not,
no, I just wanted to relieve some concern that I saw in an email that those costs are being monitored, if I am correct, Madam Finance Director.
I'm not sure which email that you're referring to. Yeah, I'm not sure which email. Was I on this string of emails?
No, I don't think so. It was just random.
So the issue with the expenses, as I see it, is that we started incurring them in our normal budget accounts. And then we did a contingency transfer to cover some of that. But now we're going to try to accumulate those and move them to a separate grant project to cover them. So we're trying to gather them up and list them completely, and so that we can move them appropriately. That's what we're working on right now as far as the expenses are concerned, but I don't know what the email was about, so I can't address that.
okay.
Okay.
Is there anything
right.
further, anything for the good of the order? Do I hear a motion?
Motion to adjourn, sir.
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 We are adjourned.